Well, watching Ignite Your Day. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for being a part of our broadcast. We're excited to bring this story straight to you every single time that we have the cameras rolling, testimonies coming, and God is moving in great ways. I have been blessed. I'm looking at this past year and just seeing all the amazing testimonies that I've seen, amazing healings, amazing miracles that I've been able to witness and see a part of what God does. And this is just a small part. I was in Peru, and I was with this pastor. We're having ceviche, and it's a fish dish, and it was a little different than I normally eat it. But hey, I ate it anyway. It was food. It was good. And I went over there, and I was with him, and he told me that what he's seen was just a little. This was just a little bit what I'm seeing, the miracles and the healings and deliverances that we're seeing in Peru this past year. It was amazing to see what God did. It was amazing to see how God just moved and touched people and just changed people's lives. You don't know what you're going to go do, but God does. You don't know who you're going to touch, but God does. You don't know how many people will be influenced, but God does. A lot of times when I get on that plane and I go to a place, I'm just wondering, Lord, just show up. That's all I'm saying. God, just show up, because I can't do anything but God. And I just believe and trust God, and I can't explain to you. I can't explain to you why this happens in our ministry and why in other ministries, people in other ministries, what goes on in those ministries. But I can only tell you that when God chooses a person, the hand of God falls on them. God will spend time with that person. God's supernatural will happen around that person. We cannot dictate who God chooses. And I'm not saying I'm all this, because there's many out there that are chosen, that God has chosen as well, that God has done wondrous things, and that God moves in them as well. But let's just take a minute to think about that. If you think about it, when God chose Saul in the Bible, because Israel wanted a king, God already put someone aside, checked him, decided this was the one he was going to use. And God put all this authority instantly. Saul didn't do anything. Just instantly, he was the king of Israel. He was a king. And God chose him. But then later on, God chose David. Now, when God chose David, get this, he went through all the strong men like Saul was. He went through all the brothers. There were all different aspects of them that could have easily served the kingdom. But he chose David because of his heart. He chose David because David was in love with God. David was, in no question, David was in love with God, how he loved God. I looked at those scriptures of how were talked about last week about God's presence. And I had to step back and think, you know what? Out of all the people in the Bible, someone that understood God like I understand God, that I could relate to, was King David. King David knew God. In the scriptures, it tells you that King David said, I killed the lion, he was with me. I even killed a bear, he was with me. And I'll kill this Philistine, because he's with me. But let's back it up. Let's look all the way back to where King David said, I killed the lion and I killed the bear. It was during his mid-watches that he's watching, I call it the mid-watch, overnight watches, that he's watching the flock, the sheep, and he's over there looking at them and taking care of them. And he had to kill these animals that were going to come devour his flock. He knew God. David was a psalmist. He praised God. He worshiped God with all his heart. We know that. We see that later on in his life, that we see him playing the music to calm Saul down. I guarantee you that he spent time playing to God, watching those stars. And see, when you spend time with God, and you spend time worshiping the Lord, early in your life, there's a reverence, a respect You know your Father. You see, David had such a reverence for God, a reverence for him. He understood who God was. He understood his place with God. And he loved God. In fact, the Bible said that he loved God, that he had God's own heart. That David was a man after God's own heart. And that he loved David. Now you look at this, and I can only say this. I understand that. I understand that he stood up playing music, had to keep himself awake while he watched these crazy sheep. I understood that he just worshiped him, and there was such a reverence for him, a reverence for the Lord. Because you see, when I was in the military, I was in the Navy, and I was standing watches in the middle of the night. I would watch the stars, the ocean, and I would be singing to the Lord. Now, I'm not the best singer. I got to tell you that. I'm not the best singer. But I worshiped the Lord. I stood in front of the stars, the moon, just on the middle of the ocean, pitch black except for the light from the sky, and just talked to God, and just worshiped him, and just adored him. And I know those hours, those days, those months, those years, as spending time with God, I know his presence. I know his presence is with me. I know, as the scripture says, that the scripture that we read yesterday, I commanded thee, be strong and of good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest. I know that God is with me. I know no matter what I do, where I'm at, that his presence is with me. We'll be right back in just a minute. God bless.